This episode is brought to you by Platinum Black. So, what is Platinum Black? Who are they? What do they do? They're a strategic marketing and advertising consultancy for teams who already know what they're doing, but want a partner who can help them move faster and think bigger. I'm obviously a fan. I got this not because they're a sponsor. This is from the time I spent freelancing with them. So I've worked inside their process. I know their people. Their executive creative director is someone that I've respected for years. The managing director is smart, focused, competitive in all the right ways, even down to the most junior account people and creatives that I've worked with. This is a team with serious brain power and zero ego, just good people doing good work. They specialize in working alongside in-house teams to unlock growth, clarify strategy, and make creative that actually drives results. So if that sounds like your kind of partner, visit platinumblack.com. And now, here's the show. This is Let's Bring It In, the podcast about creative leaders doing great work in-house. I'm Greg Christensen, and my guest today is Aaron Wiggan. He's the Vice President of Brand Creative for the NHL Seattle Kraken. Aaron helped build that brand from the ground up, and before that, he led brand strategy at REI. It's one of my favorite stores. And earlier in his career, he worked at agencies like Droga 5, Goodby Silverstein, and Barton F. Graf 9000. And bonus, he's an alum of the VCU Brand Center, my alma mater. Aaron has a great way of thinking about creativity and leadership. At one point, he talks about being a taste bud of the universe. He's talking about going and experiencing things, building a point of view. That idea shows up throughout this conversation. We talk about the shift from agency to in-house, what it takes to build a brand from scratch, and how to lead creative teams with clarity and trust. I love this conversation with Aaron. I think you're going to like it too. Let's bring it in. Aaron Wiggan, welcome to the Let's Bring It In podcast. I'm really glad we could make this work. Thanks for being here.
You got it. Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to chatting with you and talk about experiences we've had together. You know, it's going to be pretty cool.
Cool. So just by way of introduction, you're the Vice President of Brand Creative for the NHL Seattle Kraken. I have that right?
You got that right. Yes.
Okay. And before that, you were a Director of Brand Strategy at REI. But you didn't start in-house. I know that you've been at like really great, respected creative agencies. And I know, like, just quick shout out to the VCU Brand Center because we both went there. And so I know, not at the same time though, but like, I know that being in this industry was intentional. Like, you don't go to the Brand Center unless you know this is the industry you want to be in. So I'm curious to know, like, how did you go from like Brand Center, you leave and you're like, these are the shops I want to work at. And you've worked at, I mean, some great shops like Droga 5, Goodby Silverstein, Barton F. Graf. Like, those are the shops I think most graduates want to work at. But then you do REI and then you do the Kraken. So like, take us on your journey. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah. I've been very fortunate in my career. I try really hard to pick places that I want to be and focus on where I want to go. And I think that's sort of reflective of just my career and the stops that I was able to make along the way. But I'll tell you, this actually starts even before Brand Center. And it's part of an operating philosophy, which has been very helpful for me just throughout my entire life, which is to be a little bit of a taste bud of the universe. And I mean, for me, it's like go out and try things and get experience, because the more you try, the more you do, the more you experience, the greater pool you're going to have to draw from. And when we work in a field like strategy, even account management, certainly in creative, I'd heard an expression very early on: originality is determined by the obscurity of your reference, which is really how much do you know, how deep can you go on pretty obscure things, because you're willing to push yourself outside of the norm. And so for me, I started in university. I did an undergraduate degree in post-colonial theory, and I did a minor in forestry. So those two things really not related to each other, and they're not really related to a career path. I was really fortunate. My parents, my mom was a teacher. My father was actually worked as an account person in a small agency in Canada. He ended up growing that agency, and so I was around both education and I was around communications. I'm nowhere near as organized as either of them, so my path was a little bit different. But when you graduate and you have a post-colonial theory degree major and forestry minor, you're like, what do I do? I don't know. Do I become a professor, or what is there?
Yeah.
And as I was looking through schools, VCU popped up, and it looked like an amazing place where you could learn strategy. You could apply critical thinking, the ability to write, and turn it into creative outlets. And um, it became the place that I just wanted to go. And so I found an internship at Rethink in Vancouver, which is a really small boutique agency. They're actually quite big.
Great shop. Like I've been a fan of them for years.
They are doing incredible work. Back then, it was really just Vancouver, and it
Yeah.
was a long time ago. And I did an account person internship, and it was horrible. I am not organized, and I failed with them miserably. But they gave me an opportunity to get into VCU, and after that, it was really, I was given advice early that VCU is a testing ground for ideas. It's not a place to go and try to be an agency person, or and as a result, they're like, push it, get weird, go as far as you think you could go, because they're going to dial you back. But that means you start to really push your boundaries. And as a result, I went and just had a blast. I love the professors. I love the students. I'd never lived in the United States before, Richmond, Virginia. So, if you're talking about being a taste bud of the universe, wow, it was just this overwhelming stimulation of all these people, places, ideas, histories I've never been a part of. And the growth was really rapid, and became friends with one of the professors, Mark Fensky, and he was the one who helped me land my first internship at Wiggan and Kennedy.
Oh,
and
wow.
and after that, it's I got some stories from there too, but it's that starts opening doors, and you find focus. So that's a
I
little
mean,
bit, that's how
Fensky
I got there.
Fensky still is a legend. I graduated, I think, a year or two before he started teaching there, which I've always thought was either like really lucky or terribly unlucky, depending on who you talk to. But I mean, he's a legend. His stuff is fantastic. So it's cool that you had that relationship with him.
Yeah, he wasn't super. He's he's not in the room with me, so I got to be careful what I say. But he didn't always fully align with strategy and strategists, and I was in the strategy track there. Um, and so it was challenging to make inroads, but I think part of it was, you're in grad school, you can fail because it doesn't really matter. Like, nobody, when you graduate grad school, is like, what marks did you get? That's gonna determine if you get the job. So,
Yeah.
he would want to talk about song lyrics, and you'd bring music instead, and be like, the lyrics don't matter, it's the music. And that would make them both insanely mad, but he would also be like, okay, that's just different. Again, you're trying to do something differently than what was expected, and you learned that maybe it's not the right way to go, but at least you tried something. I think those things start to build some respect and some understanding that you're willing to push it, and that you're not just there to learn the rules, that you can stick within. And that
Yeah.
helps.
And then talk to me about, I mean, because your resume is just like would make anyone jealous. I mean, you intern at Wyden and Kennedy, you work at, where did you go? Droga and then Goodby, or how did you bounce around?
So the career trajectory, we did widen, and it was an amazing experience. Learned so much. Britton Taylor was there. Asia Wright was my
Britain was the year behind me.
yes, also VCU
Yeah.
alum, and wonderful. Um, and then through actually VCU again, one of the kids I graduated with, Jared Creason, made an introduction at Goodby Silverstein Partners. And again, like, just the interview process for me there was, it was about, drawing from all your experience, making sure you stand out, making sure that they might think you could be potentially the craziest or best hire ever. And you don't
Yeah.
want to be right in the middle of like, hey, he's a safe bet. And the interview process went really smoothly. I met lifelong friends, and then from Goodby, I even met my wife at Goodby. She was an account person, worked on different accounts, and then she's a born and raised New Yorker. So after about 5-6 years at Goodby, she decided she wanted to move to New York, and then I decided I'd like to go with her, because that's just a good choice to follow somebody you
Yeah.
love. And um, through there, it was, you start to make contacts again through VCU and Barton F. Graf 9000. It became an interview process. A woman from Goodby Silverstein, Laura Janess, was the head of strategy, and I reached out to her, shared all the work. She knew me reasonably well. We worked together. And when an opportunity popped up, I jumped on it. And, then you do your New York stint for a while. But Goodby was an incredible place to be at the time to learn so much. Again, given way more opportunity, probably should have been, but you make the most of it. You make mistakes, you learn, and you push work, and things change too. So you're lucky you're on an up cycle, and um, you ride the wave while you can get on top of it. It was so much fun.
Yeah. And then was REI your first in-house gig or in-house job?
It was, yeah. So I did about 18 months at Barton F. Graf. The agency went through some tougher times, and it felt like I needed to go look for other opportunities as well. They continued on for another year or so after, um, with Jerry and Barney and them starting their own separate project. But Droga was the next stop, and it was probably the best time of my life just because I became a group strat director, ran some really large accounts, had an incredible team. Creativity was amazing, but we had kids, and in New York,
Yeah,
kids,
yeah.
especially in South Brooklyn, you're down in Red Hook, Cobble Hill, bouncing around. It's not the easiest, and my wife and I decided we wanted to start looking West Coast. And this is advice I would give to anybody is think about brands you love, agencies you love too, but brands you love. Write the job you want at that brand, and then reach out to people who look like they might give you that job, and that's pretty much how it worked. um, I reached out to Ben Steele, who was the chief creative officer, and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about leaving New York. Here's a job description I think would be super cool. Tell me if you guys ever have an opportunity." And he said, "You won't believe this, but that job does sound cool, and I think you should do it." And we just picked Seattle as one of three cities we wanted to be in, closer to my parents, to get some family support. And that's how the interview process started. There was just reaching out, sort of cold calling somebody with a job description, saying, "I think you should hire me to do
So,
this."
I mean, I love that. Like so many of us, I mean, we're just kind of trained to be like, okay, well, so look at the job boards or, if you're coming up through an agency, I mean, you kind of like reach out when you know that there's an open creative partnership role or a strategy role or something. But like what you're saying is you wrote your job description and said, anyone got this for me?
Yeah, do you like this? And it's the networking part. I just can't stress it enough. This is hard to do because sometimes you have good days and bad days, but just if you can be a nice, affable, on time, person, it goes a long way. And when I was at Goodby Silverstein, this is 2009, we worked with TD Ameritrade. They hired Cornell Anderson, which is a fantastic design agency, or was here in Seattle. And Ben Steele was the head of design or head of creative for the account. So we brought him in, gave them ideas on how we wanted to work with TD Ameritrade to redesign their in-store locations. And it was a 6 month, connection. We met twice in person. And then jump 10 years, a decade later, and I go, I think I know a guy named Ben Steele. Where is he? He's at REI. Love that brand. I'm going to reach out. And because there had been such good rapport, and I think you're able to provide direct, honest, creative feedback that they respect, and vice versa. He's like, I know you, and this is a thing that we should make work. So just always make the network, and then it's
Yeah.
called your trap line, right? You got to make sure you know people, and be good to your people.
Yeah. Talk to me about why you were interested in REI. I mean, I'm a fan. I've been a member since like, I don't know, 97 or something. And it's one of my favorite brands of all time. What was it about it that, I mean, obviously you kind of want to go West Coast. So you're looking at, Seattle's a good place. They've got a lot of different places. They're obviously in Seattle, but what was it about REI that really drew you in?
And I mean, I grew up in Canada, and I love the outdoors. And it's coming out of Droga, where a big part of the Droga special sauce was they talked about their four box and the purpose. Um, to some extent, I think we probably live in a post-purpose world now more than we did back then. But it was an amazing thing to be able to be part of, writing purpose and these sort of manifestos of why we exist, and giving people a rallying cry. And when you meet with REI, you feel that sense of vision, mission, and purpose to the core. And I mean, it's been 6 years since I worked there. A life outdoors is a life well lived, is just, it's like ingrained in my soul. And the mission of getting more people to experience the benefit of time outside felt like something I wanted to do, and something I was missing from New York as well. So this is just deeply personal for me. I miss the outdoors. I feel a disconnect. I think we were talking a lot about, at the time, the tech you're living in um, your isolation chambers that is headphones and music and Instagram. And I really was searching for something beyond and a brand that I could really invest myself into. They let me, the opportunity was fantastic to run a brand team. But I think being connected to a company that was national, that had scale, that built their own products, that sourced other products, and had this very singular vision felt like something that would be really both challenging to be a steward, but exciting to help reimagine and reinvent. And they just come opt outside. They were soaring creatively, and it just seemed like it was too good to pass up. Once that opportunity showed up.
Yeah, Opt Outside was terrific. When they did that was when they decided they were going to be closed on Black Friday.
Yes,
That made me an even bigger fan if I wasn't already.
I totally agree. When you see the work, you see how it was integrated, and every 160 stores or something like that had to shut down. I think the internal rally that it had was as big as the external rally, just getting the awareness and the PR. But the people there are like, this is who we are and what we believe. It's really hard also though when you when you achieve that level of excellence, you chase it for the rest of your life. And I think that also becomes an albatross in some ways. And you want to recreate the lightning that struck, but that's not how lightning works. And I think you can't chase it. You kind of have to be more attuned. So it was fascinating for me to be able to show up and say, okay, you guys have done amazing things. How do we keep that trajectory, and how do we keep momentum? And um, yeah, it was a really wonderful experience. I learned a lot of things on the brand side, and I also learned a lot of tools that I wish I'd known at agency side along the way, really specifically at REI.
Well, let me ask though, I mean, so you're a fan of REI, like it's a cool brand, you like it. There's the pull from like, let's maybe move from sort of the East Coast New York lifestyle to the Pacific Northwest and have that lifestyle. But you'd been at these great agencies. What was what was your thinking when you're like, I mean, because you could easily just say, well, I'm going to go work for an agency in Seattle or in Portland or in one of these areas, or I'm going to go work for an agency that has a lot of um, outdoor or cool clients. Like, what was it that made you go, I'm going from these cool agencies, and now I'm not going to be in an agency anymore. I'm going to go in house.
Probably there was some, I was a little naive on some things. When I worked at Drogo, Prudential was one of our clients, and they had an internal agency, and I spent a lot of time with that internal agency. Um, they were wonderful people. I would have said that they leaned really heavily on Droga for the creative side of it. And so I was a little trepidatious maybe about what's the creative output going to be um, as you get into this. But I think part of the challenge that is exciting is that continued obligation to the brand. You're no longer a consultant. You have to live with the decisions that you make, so that there's a little bit more skin in the game. And one of the things I've always found, and this is weird, and maybe it's a little bit of the social anxiety, or just anxiety that I had even working agencies. When you're sitting across the table from clients, you're trying to explain their business back to them, and there's always a hint of you that feels a little bit like an imposter. Like, I know agency life, I know creative work because I'm on the agency side, but I don't really understand your business. I know there's politics, there's nuance, it's a multifaceted thing, and we're just one sliver. But you have to sit with confidence and tell people what they're doing and how they can do it better. And there was always this little hint of imposter of like, I don't know if this is 100%. And I was really curious to see what the other side was like. And being on the other side, you learn so much. That you do learn the politics, you learn about limited resource, how people have to fight for resources, and you learn about the complexity of business, that things that seem simple or easy on one side are actually much more nuanced and complicated um, on the other. And then I think it was just, let's try something totally new. I'd heard work-life balance potentially would be better as well. Agency sides, they grind you, and they grind you pretty hard. And this sounded like a place where you potentially wouldn't work on weekends unless something big was happening, and that was kind of refreshing with kids as well. um, and a challenge to do excellent work as well in house. Like, how do you push something in house to be as excellent as you do when you're in an agency, because agencies are so focused. We have one
Yeah.
role. We show up. We put all of our time and resource into campaign communications and helping to define some of the systems that go around that. And what freedom there is in having that singularity of focus, which you just don't get on the brand side. I'm not sure that fully answers your question. That's kind of a
no. But it seems like that's part of what it is. Like, I don't know that there's necessarily one straight answer. I mean, I think the whole career thing is meandering, and I think the whole, should I be in-house, should I be not in-house? Like, I think the entire agency landscape, we're seeing change. I don't know about you, but when I graduated from VCU, if anyone said, do you want to go do creative at REI? I'd be like, well, but they're not an agency. So, like, why would I do that? I want to go work at an agency. I want to get into CA. I want to win one-show pencils. What am I going to do, at REI? And I think more than ever now, you see like top award-winning, really great talent who are like, I would absolutely go work for Coke. I'd absolutely go work for Yeti. I'd absolutely go work for someplace in-house. So it's not that surprising to hear it be a little bit wandering, because I think we're all doing that.
I think, yeah, we're all finding our way. And I think probably the hardest part, so brand side and agency side titles, and the way in which we create structure on both sides is very, very different. You might have a 30-something being a group strat director that's managing 18 people in an agency. You probably won't have that on a brand side. Just the way that seniority works is really different. So I would have said the hardest part was a bit of an ego death that had to happen where, I'm a group strat director. I'm managing a team of almost 20 people with really prestigious fun accounts like Hennessy, or flying to France and meeting with Jean-Philippe, who's the master blender, to going to be a director. And that felt like a step back. The pay was a step back too. Everyone thinks you get paid more brand side. I can guarantee you don't. So if you're chasing cheddar, stick with the agency for a while.
Was some of that just New York to Seattle? I mean, New York is New York, so.
Yeah, I do think that's true. Seattle is, I was just actually looking last night, it's probably 5th most expensive city in the US, so it's not a slouch. I think Seattleites have had a hard time coming to grips with that, so the pay hasn't necessarily followed with the cost of living here. But I think the title change, the pay change, and then also going from a team of almost 20 to a team of 3. So that was a lot. There's a lot that was being given up, and I my wife is really lovely and insightful, and she basically told me careers aren't ladders. She's like, they try to convince you that you have to go climb. She was like, that's not how a career works. She's like, sometimes you go 2 step backs to go, backwards to go 2 steps forward, and then a side left, and then you're 3 steps ahead again. You don't know. And I'd say that is exactly what happened, because I came in as to run brand strategy for REI, which was a team of strategists. I got to I hired a Droga person as well, Danielle Vassan. She came, she's an incredible talent. She's still at REI. And we already had a few strategists there who were very talented. And then I brought one in from Los Angeles, and we had a really amazing brand like top tier level brand strategists working at REI. But over that time, you start weighing in more on creative. You end up with creative partners who are like, we need more strategy and systems thinking. How do we do that? We don't want just one-off campaign lines. And you start to get more influence on the creative. And it's way less precious than agencies. Agencies are like, oh, you're an account person, you're a strategist, you're a producer. You can blend it. And that's what I love, is that there was way less division between roles. And if you showed capability, interest, desire, and a willingness to work, you could just start to do it. And so next thing you know is you're providing design briefs. And actually, I probably should get into this too, a little bit of the way of working.
Yeah.
But for me as a career, that went from strategy into creative development, not just writing the briefs, but helping to write platforms. And then from that into how do platforms translate into design language and design systems. And then that ended up becoming part of the job at the Kraken. So when the Kraken hired me, it wasn't just to do strategy anymore. It was, we need someone who can develop and steward a brand, soup to nuts. Like, what are the narratives? Well, start off, what's the brand? How do we define our value systems? From those value systems, what are the narratives that we want to be telling, multi-year narratives? How do those then manifest through a design system? And then how do those design systems become part of our campaign in-game experience. So it's like, okay, now this is a totally different world that I wouldn't have been able to get working at an agency. It's just too rigid over there for roles and responsibilities. But jumping back, sorry, and
No, this is great. This is great.
I talk a lot. Keep me honest. One of the first things that we did at REI, which blew my mind. So I come from Droga. You do the 4-box. You look at category and customer, and you look at your product and culture, and then you triangulate a little bit. You end up with a purpose statement. That purpose statement becomes your platform that you're going to develop, and then you get into pathways, and it's a sort of a box of how you build things, and it's strategic, it's creative. When I met with the chief creative officer at REI, his first request was, okay, Aaron, you're new. I need a 3-year brand narrative. I was like, okay, what's a brand narrative? I don't know. It's a narrative about a brand, man. Like, write it down, go do it. And it's like, oh, okay. I don't know what that is. And so, you pull from all these different elements in your past career, and you look at culture, you look at who the customers are, you look at the business strategy, where they want to go. And we ended up writing a presentation called The Uncommon Path. And that presentation...
Let me interrupt real quick, though. Sorry to interrupt, but is it that you didn't know what a brand narrative was, or were they were just using a different term that you hadn't used for something that you wouldn't know how to do?
I had never been asked to sit and write a long form story about the brand. Usually it's, you write a creative brief. We have a problem, we have a challenge, we have the context we're going into, we have a target audience, we have a core idea, how the idea manifests. And even when we write campaign ideas, to some extent, there's usually a manifesto, there's a description, but you're not writing a multi-year narrative of who we are as a company as in the form of a story. And that was new to me. And so that's basically what we did, was wrote this story about who we wanted to be and this shift from the great outdoors to the world outside, and what it means, and to take the uncommon path. And an uncommon path is a very different thing for different people. For your hardcore, your outdoor enthusiasts, those are people who are going to go and try to do ultralight packing. But if you're parents with kids, sometimes the uncommon path is going and digging in your backyard to find worms, so your kids can know what they feel like, as opposed to asking Siri, what's an earthworm feel like?
Yeah.
So we wrote this multi-year narrative, which then everybody was like, this is awesome. The design team's like, I think I can start to design against this idea of the uncommon path, but stretching our definition of who we are. We ended up making a magazine called The Uncommon Path, where we would collect content and articles about gear, about experiences, about trips. And then even as a company, we used it as a rallying cry to say, if this is our business's standard retail, what would we do if we were going to push ourselves off a path that we already know? And our CEO at the time, Jerry Stritsky, said, what about experiences? What if we became the Airbnb version of outdoor experiences as a conduit to get beginners out all the way to the most advanced? So our stores no longer become places you buy, but the stores become places that we rent, and we shrink our stores, make them vans, show up at places. So the whole business became this sort of transformative idea, not suggesting in any way that the narrative I wrote did that. This was the business imperative, but the uncommon path became a framework. And now everything we do, before we get into strategy and before we get into creative, starts with writing the long form of what do we want to be? How are we going to do this? And what's the story we want to tell? The Kraken happens to be an amazing place for it, because it's a mythical creature. We have this amazing PNW backdrop, and we also have a hockey team where you can build these stories and narratives about the players, the team, the journey, the individuals, so that those stories happen. But to me, brand narrative, long form, unlocked a world that connected you with design, strategy, campaign in a way that it hadn't before. And I'm not really sure they knew what they were asking when they said, write the brand narrative. I think it sounded good. And then we made it into something together that was awesome.
Yeah. So did you use that when you went to the Kraken?
Yeah. So I did about 5 years at REI, and then the Kraken came and said, we are building this brand. It's hockey. We know who we are. We're going to be called the Kraken.
So they hadn't launched, like you were part of this new NHL team, right?
So yeah, very fortunate. Very, very fortunate to get brought in before we had a team, before we had pretty much anything. And so it was like, write a brand book. And that was sort of the starting point. I actually worked for, they won't like me saying this, and it's fine, that I worked for them probably for about 4 months for free. More as like a side project, which would, their CMO at the time was Katie Townsend, and we had mutual friends, and she would be like, hey, what do you think about this? So I started to write more of the strategy side, mission, vision, values, just to try to help out, give them some direction. And then a little bit of a brand architecture, because it's a complicated brand. They have Slapshot Hockey Partners, which is the ownership group. You had the team itself. You had Seattle Center, Climate Pledge Arena, foundations, and we needed to start organizing those, what the relationships would be, the roles that they would play, and putting definition against it. But again, it just goes in like, pay it forward, and it comes back. And so after about 4 months of this, they reached out and said, hey, you got to come do this full time. You should be the vice president that oversees all of our the brand architecture, strategy, and creative expression. And I, honestly, hardest choice I've made, which it should sound like an easy choice. It was exceptionally hard. I'd been at REI for 5 years. The pandemic just started, so there's no guarantee there's even going to be hockey. They canceled the season. We couldn't build an arena because people weren't really allowed to be with each other, within 6 feet of each other at the time. And then on the personal side, my wife was very pregnant with our second child, but also was going through chemotherapy with breast cancer. And
gosh.
There was a lot happening in my life at that time. And it just didn't seem like a great moment to say, you know what, I'm going to jump into a thing that may not even exist. And, we don't even have a team. We have no idea if the arena is going to open. But, I'm through both my wife and, family, when you discuss it after a week or two, they're like, no, you're a Canadian, you grew up playing hockey, you got to go do this. And you get to build a brand from scratch. Like, what?
Yeah.
That never happens. You get to do that. So I'm so glad I did it. It's been the most fun 5.5 years of my life is working here. For sure.
Yeah. Well, so I remember, and this is a very, very small touch point, but I guess a very visible one. I mean, when they announced it and I saw the logo, I just thought, like, that is one of the coolest sports logos I've ever seen. Because I see the S and I'm like, okay, yeah, it's Seattle. And then I see the little tentacles. And then when I saw the little red eye, I was like, oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah. So there's two people, there's probably a big team of people, but the two people who get a lot of credit for that design, Matty Merrill, who is an Adidas designer, he ran their design group, did a lot of the work with his team for the S, taking from the nobility of the sea, understanding the colorways that define the Puget Sound and Elliott's Bay. I mean, those blues, the midnight blue, the boundless blue, the ice blue, those are colors you see every day. Driving in today, that's the mountain range with the Puget. And then David Bonderman, who was the chairman and primary owner of the team, was the person who put the red eye, cut it out, and put the red eye on the S logo and said, this is what makes the monster menacing, essentially. And he was so right. I've seen it without. It's not the same. But that logo, it gave us so much to work with from a design, even from a narrative standpoint. So we know we're the Kraken. We know we're in the PNW, but when you look at that, the tentacle is a shadow. It lives in the negative space of the logo. You have the beveling that cuts, that comes in, that creates the ridges, which is really reminiscent of ship signage, the old wooden ships that would be hand carved. So you have this sort of like earned patina that comes on it from something that could only be done by hand. And from there you go, okay, well, first off, there's only one tentacle. You don't see it. The eye is in the shadow as well. And so you start to write really fun rules. Like, you never show the Kraken. Show the fin, not the shark. The things you don't know are scarier than the things you know. It's been named but never seen. And, now you get into, like, oh, what lurks below? And you start to talk about dark water. And then the ocean becomes a main character that you start to play with. The people who've seen or heard rumors of it become characters. Rumor mill becomes a character. The Kraken itself, but again, it's just a shadow. It's the doubt you have in the back of your mind. Is it safe in the basement? Is the reason you don't go downstairs. So you start to build this world around not showing anything. And that became us the best part, and having that restraint to not just do a giant Kraken wrapping stuff up and making it a cartoon. It becomes much more serious. Theater of the mind is what you get to own. I get really excited when we start talking about it. And, we didn't have a team. So when you're thinking about a narrative, well, we're going into the great unknown. So let's go. We went to the library, went to the Nordic Museum. We started scanning old maps, pulling map textures. We started looking at nautical measurements. We started looking at elements of compasses, historic compasses. You scan them, you take, screen prints off of them, and you start to build out a portfolio of textures and backgrounds and designs that give this foundation now that I think is totally recognizably us, because you have this sense of deep, dark water, but you also have this history, this sort of mystery, these legends, because they're real and they're pulled from artifacts that are 400 or 500 years old, and they're scanned textures that existed. And you just start to build this thing, and you come back. So Scrimshaw, super cool. Season 2, we know we want to be, because these are the stories people have seen. So now we're etching on bone, and we're finding artists, Inuit artists up north who actually know how to do etching, or can do specific type screen printing for us that gives us those textures. That's also a little Seattle grunge. Anyway, you can see where the narrative starts to build, and then the design language starts to pull out of it, and that to me is the most fun that we've been able to have.
Okay. So I've got to go on a little bit of a tangent here, because I love the craft that you're talking about. I mean, this is what I got into the industry for. I mean, etching on bone, like to communicate, like that stuff to me, I get excited just hearing you talk about it. And as you're talking about it, just one kind of small thought in the back of my head is like, well, yeah, I mean, like AI could never do that kind of stuff, but I mean, I imagine you use AI, right? Like, so talk to me, because you're talking about so much cool craft, and you come from a background where I know craft is respected. How does AI play into what you're doing today, and with that balance of craft that you're talking about?
I have a lot of opinions about AI. We don't use AI. We do use it on the business side, and I think AI has some really specific applications. I mean, certainly streamlining things, the way that it can process and crunch data, and it can help you look at data in a way that you've never looked at before. And we have an incredibly talented business intelligence team here, and they've built custom AI programs. I don't think I'm giving anything proprietary away on this, but essentially you can ask it a question like, what would happen if I raised season ticket prices $10 or lowered them $10? And it would give you scenarios based on 5 years worth of data, as opposed to you having to go and manually do it. I think that's an amazing application. The problem with AI in the creative capacity, in my mind, and I'm sure there's going to be people who will disagree with me, and that's totally fine. Nothing's definitive. Everything's a discussion and lives on a spectrum. AI's job is to find the middle. It goes out and it collects information, and AI will always spit out the median. It does not, by definition, find things on the fringes. It won't push you to the edge. And unless you put a typo in and make a mistake, it's not going to turn out a thought that I don't think you would have probably been able to get to. I think AI in that capacity is really good for refining copy. If you've already got an idea and you want somebody to riff with, you want to play back and forth, fantastic. You should use AI for that. If you want to talk about generative AI and you want to put in an input like, give me a tagline, it's going to come back with some pretty mundane stuff, because that's the job. It's going to take a bunch of work out there and then try to just consolidate it in and go, this is the perfect average. You ask it to generate a face, it's going to take 500 faces and give you the average. And I think for us as creatives, and not even to mention, I have just weird feelings about generative AI visually. I think there's cartoons and things where you can apply it where it feels more natural. I don't want it to be doing generative faces. We have real faces. I have real cameras. I have real wood. We have texture scanners that we can go and get. So I see AI as a tool in this, but I don't see it as the thing that I should be using to generate and push content necessarily. Certainly has a role, again, but I just think if you're looking to be totally average, AI will give you absolutely that.
Yeah. Okay. I loved hearing that. Just I wanted to see. It's a question a lot of people end up asking. So back to the Kraken. So
aggressive against AI as well.
No, we're kind of simpatico. I have sort of the same opinions. But the Kraken, I think, is kind of a rare case because you weren't just launching campaigns. At agencies, you go and you come up, you launch campaigns, but you're helping launch a team and a brand at the same time. So I want to know, like, what did that experience teach you about brand building that you might not have learned at an agency?
So I think when we think about brand building, there's different sides of it. There's sort of the visual lived brand that people have, and then there are the components that people maybe don't see that actually define the brand. And I see that more as the experience. And when agency life, when we talk about experience, it's like I threw a party, we created this experience. And I'm talking more fundamentally the experience of the business and how the business operates. And I don't think I would have had exposure to that having been on the agency side. We would have been able to build graphics, we would have been able to build, textures, a design language, fonts, typeface, language, and we would have been able to build that agency side. We got to do that on the brand side as well. But the real magic, and I didn't get to do this, this was me learning. And it came from our CEO, Todd Lewicki, and he's been around a lot. He worked for the NFL. I think he was chief operating officer at the NFL. Don't quote me on that. But he also ran other hockey teams, Minnesota Wild and Tampa Bay Lightning. He's done this before. And the way that he built the brand was through community engagement, hosting listening events with season ticket members so that we got input, finding tribal leaders here in the PNW to make sure that we had First Nation inclusion and representation in decision making. He hired in people who were ex-city council members that could help us facilitate zoning that we would need to do to make sure that we were going to have the right traffic patterns, and that we would also have the ability to create a seamless and reasonably easy ingress of people, and also as people are leaving the building, because we had the monorail align with us so that we could make our hockey tickets public transit tickets at the same time. So to me, those are the elements of the brand that are unspoken and unseen, but give it soul and gave all of us the ability to navigate what would have otherwise been a very complicated, challenging space that could undermine the values and the brand that you're creating that's an externally communicated piece. So to me, it was a masterclass on not only do you need excellent lawyers, you need city council members that know and can navigate the way in which you need to relate to the city, Seattle City Center. You need to understand all the nonprofits that work there, the skin that they're going to have in the game and how you can engage them. And then you also have to be able to build the team around it. So there is a lot more going into the brand, I would have said, than just, the crest on the front or the colorways that we were using. I don't think you get that agency side. That's an inside out. Like, this is a whole different level of people who are thinking about how to build a brand and a business at the same time.
Well, it's almost, it's in one sense, I guess that's the true meaning of a brand, but also it feels like bigger than a brand. When in advertising, we talk about the story, the promise, brand guidelines, like things like that. Working with the monorail system to make sure that the season tickets are also public transport. I can see why that would make people appreciate the Kraken more, even if it's subconsciously.
Totally. And that to me is part of the brand, right? Like, it's this idea of sustainability is certainly a part of who we are. Climate Pledge Arena, we own a 49% stake in the arena as well. And I think being innovative that way, pushing really hard to be a leading team around sustainability, those elements all pull together and they hold together because this brand is so much bigger than just the team. Then I think there's also the foundational components of the brand. One of the pieces that you learn as you go through it, and I found it's more on the stewardship side than it is on the agency side, right? So agencies show up, they disrupt. By nature, that's your job. You've been hired by a brand, you're going to disrupt it. You guys have been going stale. We're going to infuse new energy. We're going to make customers see you in a different way, and we're going to meet them in a different way. And there's just this huge energy. When you become brand side, it's a little bit different, and it's about stewardship. We got to create it so you infuse that energy. But then how do you I'm I'm here for the next 5 years. I don't have the luxury in some ways of an 18-month really fun rip-off campaign and then disappear. And so you shift a little bit from where you were agency side, excuse me, and you get into what our mantra is: clarity, consistency, and continuity. Be clear on who you are, understand who you are, and own it. Um, be who you are and build that universe. Create your own cinematic universe, or theatrical universe for your customer, and reinforce it over and over again. The more you reinforce it, the more permission you have to do subtle disruptions, and those subtle disruptions become big ripples with your fans because they think they know who you are, and all of a sudden, bang, you hit them with something that still feels like it could only be you, but was totally different than they expected. And they're like, whoa, didn't see that coming. And then continuity is long-term view. We can't do one-offs that will undermine who we are because it's going to be fun for a day. Everything we do has got to be iterative. Even for us launching a third jersey, which was a big process, home and away, we had a winter classic, we had a reverse retro. We talked a lot about going all black, and we had a glow in the dark element to it. But for us, if we call our home the deep, and we have had, fear the deep, welcome to the deep, these sort of ideas, this became the abyss, made to menace. And we talked about bioluminescence. We didn't want to talk about glow in the dark threads. We talked about bioluminescence in the PNW, and that sort of magical, terrifying experience that you have when you put your hand through the ocean and these, bioluminescent organisms come to life, and they create this bizarre, ethereal world that only exists in the shadows at night. Totally different than where we'd been, but it still felt relevant to who we were, and it felt like it was this we were essentially taking our story and pushing it the next step without deviating completely, and you got that continuity that really mattered. So anyway, I think it's a shift of mindset of how you steward and improve, as opposed to reimagine and sort of shock a little bit, it was my agency experience more so.
Yeah. Talk to me a bit about what's it like to create a brand, to create a story, to create something that generates you want people to be interested in it, but that in some ways is separate from the team's performance. I mean, you can have a great story, great logo, great colors, great everything, and then the team, they could win the Stanley Cup, they could almost win the Stanley Cup, they could have the worst record in the NHL, you could get to the playoffs. So what's it like building that where you have, I mean, you've got a big part of the brand and the story that is just outside of your control?
It really is. And that's where that clarity, consistency, and continuity matters so much. McDonald's isn't always the best example, but like if you go to McDonald's in Japan, you know generally what you're going to get. And sometimes that comfort food is really helpful because you're like, oh, it's probably a bad example because the food in Japan is so amazing. It doesn't matter. For me, the way I described it here, and you just nailed it, is can you imagine opening a bag of Cheetos and not knowing what the Cheetos were going to taste like every single time you open the bag? It's really hard to build a brand around a product that is day-to-day inconsistent. And hockey, that is hockey. You have momentum, you lose momentum. Before we started the recording, we were talking a little bit about the games and where we are. And last night we lost to St. Louis. That's a non-playoff team, and we are in the playoff hunt. It changes the mood of the fan base, and it changes the mood of people in the office. And so you really need the brand, I think, to have a compelling story, and you need to be able to lean on the brand when the product isn't delivering. When the product delivers, the brand is easy. Everyone's happy. And I mean, your whole life just becomes so much easier because the product sells itself and it soars. When the product is having challenges, you have to lean heavily on the brand. There is a fantastic movie called Being There. Have you ever seen?
Yeah, and read the book by Jerzy Kosinski.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's the moment when Chance the gardener is talking a little bit about, I think he's meeting with the president of the United States, and he's talking a little bit about gardening. And he talks about why plants invest in their roots for the long winter, and that they can flower and be beautiful in the summer. And for me, that really resonated. I saw that movie a long time ago as something for brands. The reason you invest in brand while things are going well is so that when they're not, you have a root structure that you can draw from and that you can lean on to help get you through that long winter. And it's part of it, bizarrely, a movie that is, is sort of like a comedic drama, ended up becoming a foundational part of how I think about branding. And when you make the Stanley Cup playoffs in season 2, you try to pull as much of that goodwill and even budget. Like, budget shows up, let's put it in brand. Let's go invest in the storytelling, the ways that we shoot, where we're going to shoot. And let's build the root system, because you just don't know. You don't know how long the winter is going to be. And I feel like when it becomes winter, a lot of brands immediately just go, put it on sale, race to the bottom. We're going to just, as quickly as we can, put coupons out there. And I understand how sales work, and I understand that there are moments that you can do that. But if that's your plan to survive the winter, you're going to deplete your resources, and you're not going to have much plant left by the time you get to the summer again. So it's a survival strategy in some way.
I know we ought to wrap up, because I want to be respectful of your time. And I also think that any leadership questions, if you can end on Chance the Gardener and Peter Sellers, and that's about as unique as I think I've ever heard here. But is there anything that you can share about your leadership, or what you understand leadership to be, and how it's grown from early agency days to now?
Yeah, I have really strong thoughts on leadership. And I tell you that most of the success I've had in my career is because of other people. I think I'm really good at my job. I think I work hard. I think I'm focused. I think I have a vision. But I really believe it's the people around me that make everything I've had, everything, the brands that we've worked on, and the success that they've had, it comes from them. And I think a lot of it has to do with leadership. And I'm going to throw another one. This is a weird one. It was a mentor of mine, Ted Florea, who is a group strategy director at Droga, talked about adaptive handicapping. And if you're the alpha gazelle and you're being chased by lions, where do you run, is the question. And a lot of, alpha people will say you lead the pack. You're at the front. You show them where to go. And in adaptive handicapping, it's the opposite. You would run at the back of the pack. And you would do that for a few reasons, one of which is to protect the herd. The second is to show the herd that you're not afraid. And the third is that you're going to wag your ass at the line just a little bit. And leading from the back, not the front, isn't exactly what we're taught as we go through school. It's like, get out there and be on the front. I have found that if you are direct, if you're honest, always tell the truth, even when it's really hard. And if someone's not performing, sit them down and say, this isn't going well, but I'm here I want to help you get there. But tell the truth. And then be accountable for what those truths are that you've told, or the, promises you've made around the organization, and tell your team, show them that accountability, for better or worse. And in many ways, that means give away as much credit as you can. And when things go poorly and you're part of the decision-making process, own it and make sure that you protect your team from the hits that come, the burn that is failure. You are going to develop a group of people over time, not quickly, but over time, that I believe would street fight for you. And that, to me, is what makes a team. I would street fight for most people I've ever worked with, and I think that they would honestly say the same thing back. And it's because there is trust. And so it's really hard. People, sometimes they don't go well, and people are upset, and you're upset. And sometimes things go really well. But I think if you can get through some of the ego death and realize that other people's success is your own success, you will thrive. And if I were ever going to be interviewing with anybody for a new job, I would say you could probably pick up the phone and call any person that I've ever managed, and I'd be comfortable with what they'd say about me, even if it's not the best, because you know what? It's true. And I think some of that unfiltered, work goes a long way. Being an unconventional leader helps a lot. And in the same way where I was talking about adaptive handicapping and being the gazelle at the back of the pack, understanding how businesses work. There is a corporate structure. We have people and resources in HR, and helping your team see how far they can push it within the realms of not violating or doing anything that would get you in trouble, but understanding that there are rules that we've created within our organization, some of which can be pushed to allow you to get better output. And if you can model that behavior and help them see where that line is, I think you're going to unlock a lot from them, and they're not going to feel the fear of I just need to get things done. They're going to feel the freedom of I think I have wiggle room on how I can get through this. And in the Kraken, probably the biggest difference I have here than agency side is that there is brand clout. I can pick up the phone and make phone calls that people probably wouldn't have taken in other places, and we can do a lot of barter, for example. But we did a vote for our team, our annual team holiday party, and everyone wanted to rent a hotel room that we could pre-stock with drinks and things, and they wanted to hang out in a hotel room and then go ride a bull. Like, that's not my typical holiday party, but that's what the team wants to do, and then you facilitate it. And I think if you show them you're willing to put yourself out there and you're willing to kind of fly a little close to the sun, not too close, it's just going to bring them all up with you, and they'll use your shadow when they need it, and then they'll seek their own light when they see it in front of them. And but I honestly believe the team hire better than yourself, create an environment where they can thrive, and then you, for some reason, you will look like an amazing manager. Like, it's just but it's really everybody else.
Point of clarification: mechanical bull or live bull?
We went for a live bull, but it was a mechanical bull. Yeah.
Okay.
We have a very unusual relationship with the rodeo too. They're awesome. We get to go film down there, and like anything you can imagine. That's the other thing. Anything you can imagine, you can do. You just need to imagine it and then find the gumption to go see it through. We called the Coast Guard and we're like, hey, we want to shoot Jersey stuff on a Coast Guard ship. And they're like, I don't know. Okay. And then next thing you know, you're on a Coast Guard cutter. Or, one of our hockey players loves rodeo. So we called them and we're like, hey, do you guys think we could come and shoot some video with a hockey player at a rodeo? They're like, we'll put you in the pillbox in the middle of the ring. And then you can connect rodeo with hockey and getting back on the bull, what it means to get knocked out. Like, if you could think it, you can do it. You just have to come up with it and have the willingness to push hard to go get these things to happen. Anyway, I love that stuff. The last thing I will say, because I was thinking about it before we got together, around the difference between agency and brand side. Worst case scenario when you get to brand side. Well, first off, limited resources for a brand on the brand side. So everybody is fighting for that resource, which means your competition isn't external, it's internal. I'm trying to get budget from marketing to put into production. They're trying to get money from production to put into paid media. Corporate partnerships is trying to get money that they can put into the, developing content that they need to go bring new people in. So it's a really different world where we are all working on the same thing, but we are fighting each other for resource. Agency doesn't do that. Agency is all one team. We have one pool of resource and we're all in it together. And I love that for agency. I wish that was more brand side. But as a result, you become risk averse on the brand side. It's much easier to try to find the middle ground because you're nervous if you make mistakes, you'll lose resource. And I think most brands are also so big and bureaucratic, it's very hard to move quickly. And if you're a young person moving into the brand side, I would just say you got to try things quickly, learn from them, and then pivot. But if you get into that place where you're going to take 6 months to figure out how to make a social post, I think you're not in the right place. You got to go. And I think at that point it is make choices, move with those choices. And if those choices don't work, don't be afraid to pivot and own the mistake. And I think there's so many people on the brand side from what I've seen, and maybe more so REI than Kraken, who just don't want to rock the boat. Just get into smooth seas and keep sailing. And I think that's why people from agency life don't want to go to brands, because they don't want to sit in the middle of a boat that's on a smooth sea. Like, that's not how great sailors are made. Go find places where you can rock the boat and then also recalibrate, understand the wind and recalibrate with the wind. When it picks your sails up the right way, you go with it, but don't be afraid to put the sails out. And that's probably the biggest difference that I've seen.
Yeah. Well, Aaron, got a last bonus question for you. I love asking it of all my guests. So if it had nothing to do with hockey, nothing to do with the outdoors, maybe to do with the outdoors, but if you were at an airport right now, you can get on a plane going anywhere, time, money, not a factor. Where would you go and why? And you get one domestic location, and domestic like North America, and then one international.
I would, do like wars count? Can they be places that Have you
I mean,
have you
yeah,
applied
I mean,
there?
like
I don't know.
Jerusalem's has been on like my bucket list forever, and I know I have to like time it.
I would I love Alaska. I love being out in the wilderness, and I would say Yukon for in Canada would be one of the places I would absolutely. I haven't gone. We're gonna go. I'm taking my family to Alaska this year, but I would love to go spend some time in Yukon. I'd love to get out into the outside of the cities and really sort of understand the boreal forests that are up there. I love reading about adventure books. I love the taiga in Russia. Um,
You still have the forestry vibe from your
I
early
still
education, right?
I still do. I love it. I don't love mosquitoes. I don't love bugs, but I certainly love quiet and I love fires under stars. And I think Yukon would be the history up there is fascinating. I'm reading books about it right now, and that would be pretty high on my list. And I think an achievable goal too. And if I could go international, I would say like maybe probably in Indonesia. Never been there. I've traveled pretty extensively in my life. I'm really fortunate to be able to do that, but I've never been to Indonesia. My brother-in-law is moving there, and I've been reading a lot about different, some of the geopolitics that had happened there, and I find that whole region fascinating. And that you start to see playbooks that are unfolding potentially now in the world as well, and you're like, oh, this was probably the testing ground for a lot of these foreign policies that start here. I can say this now. I became a U.S. citizen 3 months ago, so now I'm fully naturalized.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, Indonesia is so far away. Like, I would never get to go there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't
One of
ask,
my
but I was gonna say I've been to Finland and did that because I love sauna culture and like Nordic countries. That would have been my answer. Been
yeah.
there, but now it's got to be Indonesia.
You've got a couple. Didn't a couple of the Kraken players play on the Finnish Olympic team?
They did, yeah. We had Capo Caco and then Eli Tolvanen. We also had Philip Grubauer for Team Germany, the goalie, and then Oscar Fisker Molgaard was playing for Denmark.
Yeah. Awesome. That must have been a good time to watch the Olympics, right?
It was hard as a dual citizen watching the finals for
Uh,
sure.
yeah, I can imagine.
But I've never seen Capo or Ellie so proud to come back with that bronze medal. And I think Finland
Mm,
is an amazing hockey country, and they're very quiet. Finns are very quiet people, but they're very proud people. So it was
yeah.
really lovely for them.
I'll just tell you a quick Indonesian story. So one of my really good friends and one of the best art directors I knew from the Brand Center was from Jakarta,
Right.
and it was great because we would drive around Richmond, Virginia, and he would just ask me weird questions that I never would have. He would be like, "Greg, what is a deadhead?" And then
Yeah.
I'd like have to explain what the Grateful Dead was, or he'd say, "Greg, what is a redneck?" And it would just
Yeah.
explain cultural things to him.
Yeah.
There was a movie, I don't know if you ever saw it. It was called Baraka, and it was just so Baraka. It's just a movie full of just interesting scenes from around the world. No real narrative, just kind of like a visual journey around the globe. And there was a scene in there where it was these kind of a group of, I don't know, like 50 guys sitting on the ground, and they were doing some kind of chant and some kind of dance in the jungle. Yeah, and it was the most exotic, foreign, amazing thing I had ever seen. And I brought my tape into the ad center, and I'm like, guys, you got to watch this. And we were all sitting around watching this thing that was so magical and so mystical. And Imdon from Jakarta walks by and he says, "Oh yeah, the monkey dance." And we're like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, they do this on Bali all the time." And then he walks out. And it was just so funny that it was the most amazing thing for us. And it was just such a de rigueur thing for him. So
I didn't know that's where that scene was from. But yeah, that I mean I get goosebumps when you talk about it because I remember the first time seeing it visually and the back and forth and the interplay of the people. Um, but also a good reference of things you got to go see. Like go see Baraka, go see Koyaanisqatsi, go see Microcosm. Like the more you can go out and see and taste and touch and do, the more you're going to draw from, and it just gives you such a palette. But I love that. I had no
yeah,
idea.
if YouTube doesn't bump it off, I'll try to include a little clip of that in this conversation just to
Super
whet
cool.
the appetite of the viewers. Unless you're Indonesian, then you'll just be like, "Yeah, we know this."
Yeah, we already know that. Did that in school.
Yeah. Aaron, this is great. Thanks so much for taking the time. Your career trajectory is really inspiring, really amazing. I mean, from the idea um, of what was the handicapping? The
Handicapping.
adaptive handicapping to being a taste bud of the universe, to your career not being a ladder you have to climb. There's so much great stuff in here. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your insights. Thanks for being on the show.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That's it for this episode of Let's Bring It In. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Aaron as much as I did. Special thanks to Aaron Wiggan, Vice President of Brand Creative at the Seattle Kraken. If you want to hear more conversations with some of the top creatives leading the work at places like Dude Wipes, Tony Chocolonely, Southwest Airlines, even NASA, visit letsbringitin.com. Our theme music was composed by Nick Patronella. You can find Nick and more of his work at Vimeo. And thanks to you for listening. Got to take a second just to say, please like us, rate us, subscribe, leave a comment. That helps the algorithm. I don't know how, but I hear it does. So thanks for doing that. Let's Bring It In is a production of Barnes Creative Bank at barnescreativebank.com.